In the early summer of 1912, the small Midwestern town of Villisca, Iowa, was a picture of rural peace. A tight-knit community, population just over 2,000, where everyone knew their neighbors and left their doors unlocked at night. But on June 10, 1912, that peace was shattered forever. The name Villisca would become synonymous with horror, a name whispered with unease even more than a century late. What happened inside a modest White House at 508 East 2nd Street would haunt this town for generations, a crime so brutal, so inexplicable, that it remains unsolved to this day. Josiah and Sarah Moore were among Villisca's most respected citizens. Josiah, known as Joe to friends, was a successful businessman, managing a farm equipment store downtown. He was hardworking, devout, and deeply involved in the local Presbyterian church. Sarah, his wife, was equally admired, a devoted mother of 4 and an active member of the community. On the evening of Sunday, June 9, 1912, the Moores attended the Children's Day program at their church, a celebration Sarah had helped organize. Joining them were 2 neighborhood girls, Lena and Ina Stillinger, ages 12 and 8, who had been invited to spend the night. None of them could have known that the house they returned to that night would become the scene of one of America's most notorious unsolved murders. The next morning, June 10, the sun rose over Villisca as usual. But by 7:30 a.m., neighbors began to notice something strange. The Moore house was unusually quiet. Curtains were drawn, doors locked. No one had seen the family outside. Mary Peckham, the Moore's next-door neighbor, grew concerned. She called out to the family. No answer. After trying the door and finding it locked, she contacted Josiah's brother, Ross Moore. Ross arrives, enters through the key he had, and steps into the dimly lit home. Inside, the air was heavy, stale. The shades were drawn tight. Ross moved cautiously through the parlor and into the first bedroom. What he saw would change Villisca forever. The bodies of 2 young girls lay still on the bed. Blood soaked the sheets. Ross fled the house and called for the marshal. Marshal Hank Horton arrived soon after. What he found was beyond comprehension. 8 people, Josiah, Sarah, their 4 children, and the 2 Stillinger girls, had been brutally murdered as they slept. Investigators and townspeople gathering outside the Moore house when they heard the news of the murders. Each victim had been struck multiple times in the head with an axe. The weapon, a household axe, was found in the guest bedroom, slick with dried blood. All mirrors and windows had been covered with cloths. The killer had even draped garments over the victims' faces. Drawers were opened, but nothing seemed stolen. A plate of uneaten food sat on the kitchen table. A bowl of bloody water hinted that the murderer had washed up before leaving. This was not a random outburst. It was deliberate. Calculated. The work of someone who moved through the house with eerie familiarity and terrifying calm. Word of the murders spread quickly. Within hours, hundreds gathered outside the house. The crime scene, tragically, was contaminated. Curious onlookers trampled through the rooms, leaving behind chaos. Local authorities, unprepared for such horror, struggled to control the crowd. The county coroner began his grim work as reporters from across Iowa descended on Villisca. The investigation uncovered few clues. The killer had entered after midnight, likely through the back door. Every clock in the house was stopped. Cigarette butts found in the attic suggested someone had waited there, perhaps for hours, for the family to fall asleep. As days turned into weeks, theories multiplied. Who could commit such an atrocity? And why? Some believed it was Frank F. Jones, a wealthy Villisca businessman and state senator. Josiah Moore had once worked for Jones but left to start his own company, taking key clients with him. Many thought Jones bore a grudge. But could a respected man of politics truly order a massacre? Another suspect emerged, William Mansfield, a hired killer from Illinois, supposedly paid to exact revenge. A private detective claimed Mansfield was responsible not only for Villisca, but for a string of eerily similar axe murders across the Midwest, yet no solid evidence ever tied him to the scene. The next name sent shivers through the town. Reverend George Kelly, a traveling preacher who had attended the same Children's Day service as the Moores. Eccentric and erratic, Kelly was obsessed with the case, even writing letters to investigators claiming divine insight. He later confessed, but his story changed with every telling. He was tried twice. The first ended in a hung jury, the second acquitted him entirely. The truth slipped through the cracks of the justice system. As investigators searched for answers, a chilling pattern emerged. Between 1911 and 1913, a series of nearly identical axe murders struck across the Midwest, Colorado, Kansas, Illinois. Entire families, bludgeoned in their sleep. Curtains drawn, faces covered, lamps extinguished. Some investigators suspected a transient serial killer, someone traveling by train, striking in the dead of night, and vanishing by dawn. If true, the Villisca murders were part of a grim tapestry, America's first encounter with a modern serial killer. But without fingerprints, DNA, or modern forensics, the trail soon went cold. The funerals drew thousands. Black-draped carriages lined the streets of Villisca. The Moores and the Stillinger sisters were laid to rest side by side. The community was never the same. Trust dissolved. Neighbors eyed one another with suspicion. Doors that once stood open were now bolted tight. The house at 508 East 2nd Street became a place of fear and fascination. It stood empty for years, its white paint peeling under the Iowa sun. More than a century later, the Villisca Axe Murder House still stands. Restored to its 1912 appearance, it draws visitors from around the world. Some come for history. Others come seeking something darker. Guests report unexplained footsteps, whispering voices, doors opening on their own. Many claim to feel the presence of those who perished that night, trapped between this world and the next. Whether haunted by ghosts or by memory, the Villisca House remains a monument to a mystery unsolved and a reminder of how fragile innocence can be. In the stillness of the early morning, it looks like any other home in small-town America. But beneath the paint, behind those quiet windows, lies a story that refuses to rest. The Villisca Axe murders remind us that even in the most peaceful corners of the world, darkness can find a way in. And sometimes, it never leaves.